Spicerer's table in our two-part series on Greek cookery. And today is the part 2, and we're going to show you today how to make moussaka, which is a Greek baked dish consisting of eggplant, spiced lamb, and bechamel and yogurt custard. And first of all, what I have done here is this is our bechamel sauce that I have made ahead of time. I made this so that it would be cool for us to use. I made this yesterday. If you don't want to make this the day before, just make it 3 hours ahead of time and just let it cool to room temperature, and then it can be used then. And what I have done for this bechamel, it's made the same way as we made the bechamel for the pasticcio. And I started with 2 quarts of milk into a saucepan, and I added 1/2 of a roughly chopped onion, a couple of bay leaves, a couple sprigs of thyme, about 1 inch of cinnamon that's been broken into 2 pieces, a couple of cloves, and 4 or 5 allspice berries. And I brought that to a strong simmer, dropped it to a low simmer, let it simmer 20 minutes. For the roux, it's 1 stick, 4 ounces of unsalted butter, melted completely at 3/4 of a cup of flour, whisk it in, let it cook for 1 minute, pull it off the heat. And after the 20 minutes of the milk simmering, I strained the milk little by little into the roux, beating it until it was fully blended and homogenized and smooth. Bring it all to a boil, drop it to a simmer, and let that cook 20 minutes on a low simmer. And when the 20-minute simmer time is up, add 1 cup of heavy cream and season with salt, white pepper, and freshly grated nutmeg. Make sure it's well seasoned but not overly seasoned. Don't go super heavy on the nutmeg or the white pepper. And that's how easy it is to do that. And if you need a lesson on how to make the bechamel, you can go back to the pasticcio episode and you will learn there. I'm going to show you the eggplant here. This is the eggplant that's already been cooked. In a minute here, we're going to show you how to cook the eggplant, but I just wanted to show you how thin it is. This is about 4.5 millimeters thick, and I cut it on a mandolin. You could also do it with a knife if you're so inclined. Peel 1 large eggplant. You want to use a large eggplant for this because you want these large slices. Peel it, cut the ends off, and peel it. And then cut it through the mandolin. You'll get these nice slices. I do not salt and drain the eggplant. I just leave it as is because that's the way I like it. But if you know your eggplants are extremely bitter, you could salt and drain them, but I don't usually worry about it. I like the eggplant flavor as it is. And when we come back, we're going to be in the kitchen and I will show you how to cook this eggplant. Now, next we're going to talk about, before we go into the kitchen, is we're going to talk about our spices. What I have here for our spiced lamb mixture, and this also could be made with ground beef if you don't like ground lamb. What we have here is 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of allspice, and 1 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. I also have more fresh nutmeg and some cinnamon, which we're going to use on the top, similarly as we did for our pasticcio. This we're going to use to flavor our spiced lamb mixture. We're also going to be using some onions, fresh thyme, parsley, and garlic, which we're going to use with the lamb when we pass it through the grinder. First thing we're going to do is we're going to show you how to cook the eggplant. So I'll see you in the kitchen and we'll deal with the eggplant. Welcome back to the Spicerer's kitchen, and we're going to be dealing first with cooking our eggplant. And what we're going to do here is I have my pan set up here. I'm going to turn the heat up now to moderately high heat. And I have avocado oil in here, plus to help with the browning of the eggplant, what I have put in here is about a scant tablespoon of leftover deep fryer oil, which is used oil, which is going to, there's a scientific thing where it's going to make it so that it works better for, it's going to get a better browning. And I also have a rack set up next to the stove here that I'm going to line with paper toweling, and got a rack set on top of the sheet pan lined with paper toweling, and this is to drain off the eggplant once it comes out of the oil. And we'll take a few pieces here. We're going to go little by little here. And I've got gloves on here to do this. Just dip it into the seasoned flour. And then into the egg, like so. And then lay it in the skillet. You don't need to have too much coating here. You just got to be careful when doing it here. I'll do probably 3 at a time here. Get them all cooked. They just need to be golden brown. This all because we're not worried about. They don't necessarily need to be fully cooked at this point. Just golden brown and delicious. And we'll do about 3 of them per time here. This glove off here and we'll just continue. Once we get them all fried, we will then let them cool, and then we're going to start our spiced lamb mixture. We'll head to the grinder and start the spiced lamb mixture. We're going to regulate our heat so that it doesn't stay, because you don't want to overcook, you don't want to burn the outside of the eggplant. I'm just going to get a beautiful light golden brown color. That's our oven, which I have preheated to 350 degrees. Because as I said, we're going to be baking this today, and then tomorrow is when I'm going to present it to you, because it needs time to set up in the refrigerator. That's the magic secret. Let's check the status of these. Almost there. Check this one. I have tried recipes where the eggplant is baked rather than broiled rather than fried, and uses less oil, but it doesn't have the same flavor, so we're going to do it this way. This is the ideal way to do it. Okay. And we'll take it carefully. We need to flip it over carefully. Just want light golden brown color. Just be really careful about it, okay? Get some more into the flour here. We can start a new batch here. Very important that the flour is seasoned. That's going to season our eggplants. When the eggplant comes out of the fryer, though, I will give it a tiny little bit of sea salt on it. I'll give it a tiny bit of salt when it comes out of the deep fryer. Just continue to cook it, and I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. And we're going to pull these out now. Make sure you let them drain, and then just put them on your rack. And then we'll proceed with the next few here. And if you get a lot of gunk in your oil, it can be just removed. And we'll take the next one here. Into the pan here. And one more. I have beaten 4 eggs here. Doesn't matter how many eggs you beat, just enough to get all the eggplants, which this is one whole eggplant, what I have here for you today. I have one whole eggplant, but you could use If you needed more eggs, go for it. Get some more in the flour here. I'm just putting them in the egg at the last minute because there's no point in letting them soak in the egg because they are a sponge. And it will absorb lots of stuff. So the next 3 floured. And this second batch is going to cook a lot faster than the other. So now we'll flip. Yes, there we go. Get them separated. Last one here. Just be careful when you do flip them that you don't splatter any hot grease. Now I'm going to block the tops of these other ones and give them a little bit of salt. Doesn't need much, just a little bit, just to help with the flavoring. And the secret is to let these cool to pretty much room temperature before we use them. It's going to make things a lot easier. Now we're going to pull the second batch out. And this could be eaten as a dish on its own. You just would have to make sure the eggplant was cooked through. Next we'll take our next batch of eggplants here. Place them in, and I've got 4 more to do after this. Lay them in the skillet. And one final one here. And then we'll flour up the last 4. And I've used 1 eggplant here, but if you're making a larger batch recipe here, then you can cook more eggplant. Get a little salt on this next batch here that just came out. Take the split. I'll put the last 4 into the flour. Just real easy to cook, and they cook very quickly. That's why I'm showing you how to do all of them, because they cook very quickly. Procedure. I've heard this can be called eggplant française, which is what it means when it's breaded like it is. That's what I heard, but not 100% on that name. I think if you serve it as a dish on its own, it's delicious, by the way. Next is, we'll flip these. Getting a little more golden color here, which is perfectly, oop, gotta be careful, it's spattered a little. You don't want to go much more brown than that on this recipe, because if they get too brown, if they get burned, then the flavor is not going to be the same, so just be careful here. And this should go pretty quickly on this side here. Yep, it's very quickly here. All right, pull these ones out. We'll put the last ones into the skillet here, into the egg and into the skillet, and then we'll be done. Okay. It looks like we got just the right amount of egg here. One. This dish is going to bake in the oven, so it's not important that the eggplant is fully cooked through. If you're going to serve it just as fried eggplant, then what I would do is put them on a rack in the oven and let them and allow them to cook that way. But we're not dealing with the oils about. After this will be completely, the oil will be done. I'll go ahead and flip this one over. on these last ones here. I'm going to make some room on my rack here. And then we'll just let them cool off. Got the spatula here. Start pulling out these last ones here. Perfect. You could, if you wanted, make an eggplant parmesan, breading the eggplant this way rather than in breadcrumbs. And it would be an interesting way to go, but if you wanted to make a lighter version of eggplant parmesan that wasn't so heavily breaded, this would be a nice way to go. This is going to be the last one, and then we'll be done, and the oil will be unusable. I'll strain it. When it's cool, I'll strain it into my used oil container. And that's it. Now we'll put a little salt on these last three here, and then we got one more coming out. And then after they're all cooked, just let them cool on the rack. It will be soft. Just let them cool, and that's it. This is going to be the bottom of our casserole. Get rid of our egg here. And we'll get rid of our flour. Not save the flour or the egg. It can't be used for anything else. And I'll slide our beautiful platter of eggplants here. And we'll pull out the last of it here. Okay. Put the last one out. Very important here, we're going to shut the fire off. For the last one here, we'll put a little salt. And that's it on our eggplants, and when we come back, we'll be at the grinder dealing with our meat mixture to make our spiced lamb fillet. So I'll see you soon. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table. I have my grinder set up just like we did for the pasticcio. And what I have here is 2 pounds of ground lamb. And then I also have in here, I have 1/2 of a large onion, 8 garlic cloves, a teaspoon of fresh thyme leaves, and some just roughly picked parsley, about 1/2 of a bunch of flat leaf parsley. We're going to grind this through the machine, and this is going to become our spiced meat mixture, which we will then cook and add our spices to. So we're going to start the grinder moderately. We're going to start with a little lamb. Just make sure everything gets down into the grinder. Then we're going to put a bunch of our parsley. Make sure it gets in the grinder. It's important that the parsley go through the grinder with everything else. This chops up all of our aromatics along with the lamb, so it's going to be a lot easier to work with. Put some more lamb. If you're at all worried about doing the grind, you can always partially chill all the implements. All the grinder parts can be put into ice water if need be. I do it rather quick, and I'm not ever had any problems. Put some more lamb. Just continue. And you want to make sure at the end of this process that it's just lamb that goes through the grinder. Some more lamb. aromatics in here. Grinding the meat just like before is going to give that nice fine texture that we want in our meat filling. I'll put some more lamb. And then I'll go ahead and put the rest of my aromatics in here. And we'll proceed. Always use the plunger, folks. You're going to be safe because you never know what's going to happen. It's a meat grinder, you want to be safe. Put the rest of this in here. That's all that. Leave that bowl there. And you don't need to chop the garlic, you can just leave them whole, they will pass through along with everything else. Grinder at a constant speed. You don't need to speed up the grinder. You think it's going to go faster, it really isn't. It could cause a smear, which is where the friction causes the fat to melt. It's best to just have a constant speed. This is at speed too, but every meat grinder is going to be different. We will speed it up at the end to get the last of everything to go through, but it's not important at this point. Speed it up. You want it to slowly, everything to slowly advance through. You can look inside and you can see that it's all working. Now I'll crank it up to high. I'm going to do my little trick here. While it's on high speed here, grab a small piece of sourdough bread, or any sliced bread really. Just a small piece, break it up. This is the end of the loaf. And that bread's going to pass through and will help the last of everything else pass through. We can remove our plastic film now. Go ahead and shut the grinder off now. Grab the tool to extract the plate here. I'm going to open it up just to see if there's any last minute bits here. Take this off, push, and out comes the last little bit here. That's the little bit of bread. It pushed everything through. So that's what we want. Okay. We're not going to actually use this bread. If I was making meatballs, the bread would be used, but we're just going to get rid of it here. Dump the bread in the trash. That little piece of bread just pushed the last of everything through. Okay. And just like before, take your hand and give it a good well mix. And then we'll be at the stove in a few minutes when we come back, and we'll show you how to cook off our meat mixture. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table, and here we are in the kitchen here. And what I have here, this is our ground meat mixture that we just made. And we also have here 3/4 of a cup of ground tomatoes, about 1/3 of a cup of our dry vermouth, salt, and then our spice mixture, and some fresh black pepper as well. Now we're going to start here. What I have done is put a cup of water into the skillet here. Just like before, we're going to add our meat directly into the skillet here with the water. What this is going to do is this is going to help render, everything's going to render out. So we're going to break it up. Just like we did the ground beef, we're going to do the lamb the same way. Get it nicely broken up here. And this is going to take a while actually to cook this properly. We'll continue to cook it here. And then once the lamb is fully cooked, then we're going to add our spice mixture and continue on from there. And this lamb is a leaner meat than the ground beef that we use for the pasticcio, so we're not going to need to remove any fat. We may add a little bit of oil in here if necessary, but we'll check that once the meat is fully rendered out. So just continue to stir here. And we're going to allow this meat to cook here. And when we come back, we're going to, when we come back, this meat will be fully rendered out, and I'll show you how to proceed from there. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table. Here is our lamb mixture, and it is almost fully rendered, as you can see there. And there is enough fat in here for us to work with it, where we don't have to add any extra fat, but we don't need to remove any fat. It's just got a couple more minutes here to remove the last bit of the water, and then we can add the spices. Because it's very important to bloom the spices in recipes like this. Okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add the spices in here. Okay. And they need to bloom before we add any other ingredients, because that is important to get their flavor, to bloom the flavor of the spices. Okay. Now that that's done, we're going to add some salt in here. Needs to be pretty well seasoned. And then we're going to add our white wine in here. You can really smell the cinnamon. It's lovely. And the cinnamon with the lamb is a perfect combo. And we're going to cook this until the wine is pretty much fully evaporated out, because it's important to cook off the alcohol here. I'm going to put a little fresh pepper in here. I'll grind it fresh. And then last but not least, we'll add our tomato in here. It's looking pretty good. Now we'll add our tomato in here, which is 3/4 of a cup of ground tomatoes. The other recipe didn't have any tomato in the mixture. This one has a little bit in the mixture. Now we need to cook this until it's quite dry, which means we really need to reduce this well so the tomato, everything thickens. Because you don't want to have the mixture loose in the oven, or else it's going to be loose coming out of the oven. So we're going to cook this until it's quite dry. I'm going to give it a taste right now to see where we're at here. see if we need to add any more salt. Nope. Actually, I'm just going to add just a little bit. And maybe a little more, just to guarantee that it's got enough seasoning. You just continue to stir, and this doesn't take long for everything to cook out. Okay, that's looking very good there. Now we're going to slide this off the heat, and we're going to let it cool. And when we come back, we're going to be at the table, and I will show you how to assemble our pasticcio, and we're going to be showing you the secret to this recipe, which is the yogurt custard. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table, and we're here at the table, and we're going to start with our bottom of our dish, which I've heavily buttered, and there's our eggplants. I'm first going to place a little sauce in the bottom of the thing and spread it around just on the bottom. This is just straight bechamel. We haven't added anything yet. Put a little more in here. It's important to have an even bottom. This is just a roll. You don't need much. That's pretty good, actually. Now we'll stop at that point. Now we're going to take our eggplant slices themselves and just lay the slices. They can overlap. It's perfectly fine. We're going to place the second layer. We're not going to place we're going to place our second layer, our last eggplants. We're going to do this like this. That's the last of our eggplant. I'm going to now slide this out of the way here. Next thing is our beef layer here. And I'll bring it to the front here. This is our sliced beef that we have here. And what we're going to do is we're going to stir a little bit of our bechamel into our beef. Not much. About 4 spoonfuls. Leaving us with about 6 cups of our bechamel. Give this a good stir, and then we're going to pour this into our baking dish here. And having the bechamel cold like this, it will help cool off our lamb mixture. It's just going to make assembling this easier. You don't want to assemble it when it's hot because everything's going to be too liquidy. Just give it a good stir so that it's well combined. And now we'll take this and just pour it on the top. Give it a good scrape out. Okay. And then just very carefully smooth everything out. It needs to be really smooth on this end, on this layer. It needs to be very smooth and compacted down too. Get it well compacted into all the corners. Make sure there's no air bubbles because you need this 1 inch of space that we have here for our topping. Now we're going to slide this out of the way for the moment. And we're going to pull our bowl in here. We're going to make our yogurt custard. What we're going to do here is we're going to put 2 eggs. Plus 2 egg yolks. I'm going to give them a beat. Until they're combined. And I'm going to take just a little bit of salt. Just a little bit, just to season the eggs themselves. And then 1 1/4 cups of Greek full-fat strained yogurt. It's important that it's full-fat yogurt here. You don't want to use low-fat yogurt. This is going to taste better when it's full-fat. So, that's the yogurt. And get it well blended. Okay. Now we're going to start to add our bechamel in here. I'm going to go with I'm going to go with about 5 cups of bechamel in here. I'm not going to put it all in here. So put 5 cups of bechamel in here. And I'm going to reach a rubber spatula here for the moment and help to spread this out. I've also grabbed an offset spatula here, also to assist in our process here. So this ingredient is out of the way now. This will allow us to get a nice even layer on our lamb. Just make sure it's well even. Next is our custard layer. And what I have done that I forgot to tell you at the beginning of the recipe, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Now we're going to start adding our bechamel and yogurt custard. We're probably not going to need all of this. We'll check it out, and you want to make sure it's evenly covered across the top. Because you don't want to see any of the lamb poking through. Put a little more on here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just put it all on here. Okay. That's plenty. And now we're going to take a little bit of fresh nutmeg, just like before. And we're going to do a little nutmeg on the top, as well as a little cinnamon. Then we're going to cover this with plastic wrap and aluminum foil, and we're going to bake it in the oven for 45 minutes. Now we'll do the cinnamon, just like before. I put it in a little strainer, and then just a little tap. And you don't need to go heavy on the cinnamon and the nutmeg. It just adds another nuance of flavor and makes the top look pretty. And that's that. Now we'll get our plastic wrap first. It's important here to, there we go, get a little more light. It's important here to cover it with one single piece. It is going to touch the top of it, and that's fine. It's also going to protect the layer from the tin foil, and next the aluminum foil. Okay. And then cover it with aluminum foil. This time, because it's a smaller dish, I only need one layer of aluminum foil here. Now we're going to bake this for 45 minutes. And then we're going to pull off the aluminum foil and the plastic wrap, and we're going to bake it for another 15 minutes uncovered. And if need be at that time, we can, if need be, add a little more dust of nutmeg or cinnamon if need be, if the layers are not there, but we'll check it at that time. So we'll be back in 45 minutes to check it out. Welcome back to the Spicerer table. This is our moussaka that has just come out of the oven. I have given a little more dust of cinnamon and a little more nutmeg once I pulled the paper off. And as you can see here, it's still loose. It needs to bake longer so that it's set. It still has to set, so it's going to bake another half an hour in the oven. And we'll check it at that time. Just be really careful when you put it back into the oven. Going back in the oven now. We'll set the timer for half an hour. Just be really careful. And then in half an hour, we're going to check on it. And if it needs longer than half an hour, we can cook it longer than half an hour, but we'll check it in half an hour's time. We'll be back at that time. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table. I just pulled the moussaka out of the oven, and what I did when the 30 minutes time was up, I turned the oven off and turned the broiler on to set the top. Now at the moment it's still a little bit jiggy. This has to cool completely to room temperature, and then we're going to wrap it and refrigerate it, and then it's going to be portioned out and reheated. That is the best way to serve this, because parking a night in the refrigerator, it's going to allow this to set completely on the inside, because you want it to set up before you cut into it. If you were to cut into it even 20 minutes from now, it's going to be a mess. So we're going to let this cool completely to room temperature. I have a fan going in here so it'll cool faster. And then once it's completely cooled, it's going to be wrapped and go in the refrigerator. And then tomorrow I will take out a portion and show you how to serve it. And for reheating, it's just going to be done in the microwave per serving, or it could be done in an oven per serving, or a toaster oven. So we'll see you in 24 hours time when we serve it. Welcome back to the Spicerer's table, and it is the next day. This is set in the fridge, and we're going to pull the plastic wrap off here. I will rewrap it later, but I'm going to show you how to serve this. Got a spatula here to dislodge it here. It's going to be very fluffy, but it's going to be easier to serve now that it's been chilled over 24 hours time. Very creamy, yes. And we have to be careful here. Get underneath. It should pull pretty good, yes. And yes, indeed. We almost had a perfect piece come out. A little bit of the eggplant got left behind, but hey, it happens. So the first piece is always going to be a little bit hard to come out, but that's the way it looks. It comes out easy. Now all the rest of the slices will come out very easily because we'll be able to get the spatula underneath the beautiful eggplant, and you need to get it underneath. And then this just gets covered, reheated. It's delicious. It's got a nice fluffy texture on the top of it because of our yogurt custard that we made. And so I hope you enjoy making this recipe. It's very easy. As long as you follow the steps, it's very easy. And as long as you wait at least overnight, up to 24 hours before you cut into it, because that's important for recipes like this and pasticcio, because it has a chance to set up. Even lasagna is good to let it sit overnight before you cut into it. Gets a chance for everything to set, which is really what you want. And then you get these nice portions. You try and scoop it the day it's baked, it's going to be very loose. So, hope you enjoyed this recipe, and stay tuned for more. And stay tuned for my new series, which is going to be probably premiering tomorrow morning, and it's called Dinner at Joe's. And I'm going to show you in the first couple episodes some tableside cookery. And until then, we'll see you next time. Peace out and keep it real.